The scent of espresso still lingers in my memory. Bittersweet and sharp, just like the moment everything fell apart. Picture this. A cafe pulsing with quiet jazz, people murmuring over creme brulee, and in the middle of it all, a woman standing perfectly still as the man she thought she'd marry in 16 days looks up and says, "We need to talk." No warning. No mercy. Just a velvet box on the table and a future slipping through her fingers like ash. And just like that, the life she'd built in her mind burned to the ground. But this isn't just a story about heartbreak. This is the beginning of a reckoning. A journey that starts with betrayal but dares to end with redemption, where one woman refuses to be the discarded chapter in someone else's narrative. And one man, broken by more than bones, learns what it means to fight for something real. Together, they don't just survive, they rise. I didn't even get to sit down before he broke it off. The cafe was crowded, soft jazz playing from the overhead speakers, the scent of espresso and expensive desserts hanging in the air. I had barely taken 2 steps toward the table when Caleb looked up from his untouched cappuccino and said, "We need to talk." My stomach dropped. I remember the way his voice sounded flat, almost rehearsed. I sat anyway, my palms already damp. "What's going on?" I asked, forcing a smile. "Is this about the caterer?" He didn't answer that. Instead, he reached into his coat pocket and placed a small velvet box on the table, not to give it to me, but to take something back. "I can't marry you, Rachel," he said just like that. 7 words that carved through me sharper than any scalpel I had ever held, what I whispered. He leaned back in his chair, as if the weight of honesty had finally set him free. "It's not you. It's just we're heading in different directions. I've made connections, important ones. Brianna Chen and I were aligned in ways I didn't see before. Brianna Chen, daughter of Victor Chen, the venture capitalist who practically owned half the East Coast's tech startups. My heart began to race. "You're leaving me for her. It's not like that," he said, though it clearly was. "This is better for both of us. You deserve someone simpler." I tried to speak, but my throat closed around the words. I could hear my own heartbeat pounding in my ears, louder than the music, louder than anything else in that room. All the plans, all the details, every moment we had crafted together for the wedding blurred into a single sharp point of disbelief. Was I really sitting here being dismissed like a poorly written chapter? He didn't even flinch when I stared at him, stunned and silent, trying to understand how the man I was supposed to marry in 16 days could erase me so cleanly. Then, as if he hadn't gutted me enough, he added, "Also the ring. It's a family heirloom. My grandmother would be devastated if it left the family." I slipped it off. I wanted to scream. I wanted to ask him how long he'd known, how long he'd waited to say this. But all I could do was obey. Hands trembling, chest tight, like every ounce of strength I had was being funneled into not falling apart right there. My hands were shaking, but I did it. I placed it gently on the table between us and said, "Thank you for your honesty." Then I stood up and walked away, straight past the glass doors, past the couple sharing desserts, past the curious eyes, trying to figure out what just happened. Only when I turned the corner onto Pine Street did the tears finally come. I didn't go back to the apartment we shared. I didn't want to see the half-packed boxes or the dress hanging in the closet. I couldn't face the silence, but when I arrived, it was already done. My things were in labeled suitcases by the door. Clothing, books, toiletries, all carefully sorted as if I were being returned to sender, not by Caleb. He wouldn't have been that considerate. It had to be his mother. I sat on the floor beside those bags, for I don't know how long my old studio lease had ended. I'd given it to a nursing student. A few weeks ago, every cent I had saved had gone to the wedding. I had less than $100 in my account and a full week until payday. I stared at the bags like they belonged to someone else, like I'd stumbled into the aftermath of a stranger's life unraveling. It wasn't just the shock, it was the bone-deep humiliation of being packed away so neatly, like I was nothing more than a chapter someone had finished reading. That's when I did the thing I hadn't done in over a year. I called my foster mom, Beatrice Holland, answered on the 3rd ring. Her voice warm and steady, like it always was. "Rachel, honey, where have you been? I was about to call you about those shoes we looked at last week." I couldn't even speak. I choked on a sob. Instead, that was all it took. An hour later, I was curled on her faded, plaid couch cradling a mug of peppermint tea, while she smoothed my hair like she used to when I was 13 and broken from yet another placement gone bad. Beatrice didn't ask questions. She just placed a thick knit blanket over my legs and said, "Stay as long as you need, you hear me? I've got space, and you've got nothing to prove that night." I didn't sleep. I lay there on the old pull-out bed in her living room, staring at the ceiling, replaying every detail of that conversation with Caleb. His calmness, the way he didn't even hesitate. Had he ever really loved me? Or was I just a placeholder until someone with a last name, like Chen, showed up? I felt like I had been a stand-in in my own life, a warm body in a perfect dress rehearsing a part that was never really mine. And now the curtain had dropped. By sunrise, the ache had dulled into something heavier, something like shame. I was supposed to be walking into a new life, a new chapter, a family of my own. Instead, I was back where I'd started. 29 years old, heartbroken, homeless, humiliated. At noon, I showered, dressed, and returned to the hospital. As if nothing had happened, nurses smiled. Some asked about the wedding plans. I smiled back, nodded. Late, because telling the truth felt like it would tear me open all over again. But as I changed into my scrubs and checked my patient assignments, I knew something for sure. I couldn't stay here forever. Not in this town, not with these memories, not while Caleb Hart and Brianna Chen toasted champagne to their bright-aligned future just across the state line. Not when I had nowhere else to go and nothing left to lose. 3 days passed, 3 slow, aching days, where I went through the motions on the hospital floor while trying to keep my insides from unraveling. I smiled when people asked about the wedding. I said it had been postponed. I said Caleb had a business trip come up. I said I was fine. I said too much. But on the 3rd day, while I was checking in for line in room 8, Monica, our blunt, no-nonsense charge nurse, peeked her head in and said, "You still looking for a miracle escape from this place?" I blinked what she motioned me out into the hallway and lowered her voice. "You remember Danny from Neuro? She took a private care job a month ago. Live in high pay, but she quit last week. Couldn't handle the guy." "What guy?" Monica raised an eyebrow. "Some rich tech mogul, paralyzed, lives up in Ridgeview Summit, in one of those who even builds these kind of houses. Apparently he's a nightmare. Sounds amazing. Pays triple what we make here. Live-in suite, meals included. No roommates, no night shifts, just one patient." I hesitated. "I'm not a caregiver. You're a nurse with 5 years of experience." She shot back, "You're more qualified than half the people they've had, and trust me, this guy scares most of them off in under 2 weeks. You're stubborn. That might actually work in your favor." I almost laughed. I wasn't sure what part of me still counted as stubborn. Everything inside me felt cracked. But something in her voice, the word escape, it echoed loudly. And in that moment, I realized it wasn't just about leaving the hospital or escaping awkward questions about wedding plans. It was the possibility of disappearing from the wreckage of my life, even if just for a while. I wasn't looking for a job. I was looking for a way out. "Do you have a contact?" I asked 10 minutes later. She handed me a small card with a name written in sharp, elegant cursive, Beatrice Holland, estate manager, and beneath it a number. It took me until midnight to call. I stood in the back alley of Beatrice's house in my coat, breathing in cold Colorado air, phone shaking in my hand. Beatrice Holland picked up on the second ring. "Yes. This is Rachel Foster. I was told there's a position for a live-in nurse." A pause, then, "Are you available for an interview tomorrow morning at 900? I blinked. "Yes, I can be there. Bring your credentials and references. The address will be texted shortly. Do not be late." The line went dead at 4:30. And I boarded the earliest flight out of Bozeman to Los Angeles, connecting to a regional shuttle that climbed the hills of Ridgeview until it left the real world behind. I sat in the shuttle staring out the window as pine trees blurred by, trying to brace for the unknown. I had no expectations, just the quiet hope that wherever I was going couldn't possibly hurt more than what I'd left behind. Everything felt like a dream I hadn't earned. And then I saw the house. It looked like a modern fortress, glass, steel, and sharp edges woven into the cliffside, as if someone had carved a mansion out of sunlight and stone. A long black gate swung open as my cab approached, and for a second I wanted to tell the driver to turn around. Too late. Beatrice Holland met me at the front door, a woman in her 60s, thin as wire hair, pulled into a tight twist dark blue suit, without a wrinkle. She looked me up and down with the precision of someone who had worked in either the military or hospital year early. She said I didn't want to be late. Good. Follow me. The interview was swift. She glanced over my resume, asked 4 questions. Didn't smile once, and finally said the position is yours, Miss Foster. The terms are simple, round-the-clock availability, 2 days off per month. No visitors, medical knowledge is crucial. Discretion is non-negotiable. Your patient is a complicated man. You will be living on the 2nd floor, adjacent to his suite. Meals and lodging are included. Salary $12,000 per month, plus performance bonus. Depending on the condition's progression, I tried not to react. I still remember gripping the arms of the chair to keep from laughing out loud. It was more than triple what I made at the hospital. I didn't have a plan. I didn't have anything but an overstead duffel bag and a bleeding heart, but I said yes. I said it without hesitating. Beatrice slid a folder across the table. This is your contract, review it before tomorrow. Your patient is Mr. Ethan Locke. The name meant nothing to me. Then it would soon mean everything. The next morning, I stood outside his door, folder in hand, heart thudding. The hallway was quiet, hushed by the kind of carpet that swallowed footsteps. Everything about this house was polished and cold stone. Floors, sleek lines, expensive silence. Beatrice stood beside me, clipboard pressed to her chest. You're sure you want this? She asked without looking at me. I signed the contract. That's not what I asked, I swallowed. Yes, she knocked twice, then opened the door without waiting for a response. The room was large, too large. Vaulted ceilings, glass walls, looking out over a stretch of redwood trees, sunlight bleeding across pale hardwood floors. It felt less like a bedroom and more like a throne room built for a ghost. He was by the window in a sleek black wheelchair back to us. Mr. Locke, Beatrice said crisply. Your new nurse has arrived, Rachel Foster? He didn't turn right away. Just sat there, fingers slowly tapping the armrest. Then, finally, he pivoted and my breath caught. I don't know what I expected, an older man. Maybe someone frail, but Ethan Locke was young, maybe mid-30s tall, even while seated, short, dark hair, sharp jawline, eyes like cut glass, and yet there was something exhausted about him. His skin was pale, his frame lean, but his expression was the thing that warned me. He looked at me like I was already disappointing him, so he said, voice low and biting, they sent me another one. I opened my mouth to speak, but he cut me off. What's the bet this time? Beatrice, a week, 10 days. Beatrice didn't answer. She only said, I'll leave you two to get acquainted, and left, shutting the door behind her. Silence. Stretched. I'm not here to place bets. I said finally, just to do my job. He rolled his chair a few feet closer, examining me like I was a piece of art. He didn't particularly like. And what job do you think that is? Medication, physical therapy, monitoring, vitals supporting, rehabilitation? He snorted. You forgot the part where you nod sympathetically. While I failed to walk again, that's usually everyone's favorite part. I didn't flinch. I'm not here to pity you. He tilted his head slightly. Oh, that's new. Most of them crack by day 3, maybe I'll surprise you. Maybe he said, though the smirk that curled at the edge of his mouth made it clear. He didn't believe a word. His words weren't the worst part. It was the way he said them, like he had already written me off before I'd said a full sentence. Like I was one more name on a long list of failed attempts. For a moment, I felt a flare of something. Defiance, maybe. Or maybe it was the part of me that was tired of being underestimated. We went through the day in stiff silence. I administered medication, reviewed his physical therapy plan, took notes. Ethan kept making barbed comments, testing me, pushing, but I didn't bite. I'd worked with veterans who lost limbs, teenagers who screamed through every injection, mothers who wept through morphine highs. Ethan Locke was not going to scare me. Still, there was something about him, something jagged and restless, that made the air feel heavier every time he looked at me, like he was searching for a reason to believe I'd fail. That evening, as I prepped his room for the night, he said suddenly, You're not what I expected. I looked up from the drawer. No, you haven't asked about the accident. I figured you'd tell me if you wanted to. Another pause. Another surprise. It was a ski trip, he said finally, solo. I lost control on a ridge, woke up in a helicopter, haven't stood unaided since. I nodded. Thank you for telling me. He stared at me for a long time. Why you take this job? I needed it, not the money. Why this job? I met his eyes. Because I've been lied to, because I know what it's like to be thrown away. His expression changed just for a second, like a crack in a wall that shouldn't be there. Then he turned back to the window. Don't get attached. He said, I don't do gratitude, and I don't do friendship good. I replied, I don't do illusions. He didn't say anything after that, but he didn't dismiss me either. It happened on the 5th night. I wasn't supposed to be awake, but the wind outside had been howling since midnight, shaking the windows. Like some restless ghost, couldn't decide whether to come in or stay out. I got up to close the blinds and spotted the lights still on in the West Wing gym and area. Ethan rarely allowed anyone into alone. At first, I ignored it. I told myself he probably fell asleep watching TV in there. But something tugged at me, something quiet and instinctive. It wasn't suspicion, it was something deeper, the kind of instinct you don't question when it stirs in your gut at 2 a.m. I slipped on my sweater, padded down the silent hall, and pushed the gym door open just enough to peek through, and what I saw stopped everything. Ethan Locke was standing, not completely, not unaided. He was gripping a pair of parallel bars, his arms tense with strain, sweat dripping down his temple. His legs trembled beneath him, every muscle taut, but he was doing it slowly, determinedly. Step by painstaking step, my breath caught. I had never seen anything like it, not just the physical act, but the sheer defiance etched into every movement. He wasn't just walking. He was fighting the narrative he'd let the world believe. He didn't notice me at first. He was too focused, but the soft creak of the door gave me away. He turned, saw me, and his expression shifted instantly from effort to rage. What the hell are you doing? He snapped. I heard something. I thought, get out, Ethan. Now I didn't move. I couldn't, not because I was frozen, but because something in my chest had already changed. He wasn't hopeless. He wasn't finished. He was hiding progress. Why? Why are you keeping this a secret? I asked softly, his hands clenched tighter around the bars, knuckles white. Because the minute people see progress, they expect miracles. That's not how healing works. He laughed bitterly. No, but it's how disappointment works. I've already watched people walk away once they realized I wasn't going to magically rise out of the chair and be who I was again. I'm not doing that again. So instead, you pretend there's nothing left, that you've given up. His jaw tightened. You don't get it. I stepped closer carefully, like approaching a wounded animal. Maybe I do. His eyes locked onto mine, furious, uncertain. There was a pause, a sharp breath held between us, like he was waiting for me to pity him, to flinch, to look away. But I didn't. And in that refusal, something shifted. I'm not going to tell anyone, I said, but if you let me help you, really help you, we can work towards something better. You don't have to do this alone. Why? He demanded. Why do you care? Because I know what it's like to have your future ripped away and be expected to smile through the pieces. He stared at me, breathing hard, sweat gleaming on his skin. I thought he'd yell again, order me out, threaten to fire me. Instead, he lowered himself slowly back into the chair, silent, exhausted. Finally, he muttered, fine. My heart jumped. We keep this between us, he added. No one knows, I understand, and you follow my lead. I say, stop, we stop. I say, go, you help. That's it, agreed. He studied me, eyes still sharp, but something had shifted, something unspoken. You're not like the others. I shrugged. I'm not trying to be. We started the sessions the next morning, early, quiet, before Beatrice stirred, before the sunlight fully warmed the kitchen tiles. Each step he took was agony, controlled, measured, like fighting gravity, with nothing but spite and muscle memory. But he did it, and I was there, not to cheer, not to weep, just to support, one hand studying the world. He didn't want to fall. Watching him struggle wasn't inspiring. It was brutal, honest, and raw. But it was real, and in that realness there was something sacred. This wasn't about miracles. It was about control, dignity, one trembling step at a time. It started with a voice. I was organizing the meds cabinet in my room when I heard it, deep, confident too, smooth, male. Not Ethan, not a house staff member, curious. I moved quietly toward the main hallway and followed the sound into the west sitting room there. Lounging on the leather couch was a man in his early 40s, expensive watch glinting in the morning sun, holding a glass of something that wasn't juice. Ethan, you look like hell. The man laughed. Ethan across from him offered a tight smile. Good to see you too, Jordan. That was my introduction to Jordan Pace, Ethan's longtime business partner. The man who, according to Beatrice, had stepped up to manage Locke's stratagem after Ethan's accident. Something about him made my skin crawl. There was a casual arrogance about him, the kind worn by men who'd never been told no. It wasn't just in his tone, it was in how he carried himself, as if everything and everyone in the room belonged to him by default. Maybe it was the way he looked at Ethan like he was still measuring his worth, or maybe it was how his eyes landed on me when I walked in with the tea tray, slow, assessing invasive this, the new one. He asked Rachel Foster. I said, evenly setting down the tray, she's any better than the last three. Jordan quipped, sipping his drink. She's not here to entertain. You, Ethan, replied coldly. She's my nurse. The conversation turned to business, mergers, investor tensions, government contracts. I tried to stay invisible, but one word froze me where I stood. Chen. Jordan leaned in, lowering his voice. Monica says her father's ready to push the funds through. We just need the control package transferred to the shell. Chen Holdings will absorb it. He's got contacts in the tech board. Easy. And Ethan didn't respond. He stared out the window, knuckles tight against the armrest. I've already prepped the docs, Jordan continued. We just need your signature later. Ethan said, I'll look them over. You've been saying that for weeks. If we wait much longer, the opportunity closes. Ethan didn't answer. My pulse thundered in my ears. I slipped out of the room before either of them noticed. I didn't know exactly what I was hearing. Not yet. But every word felt like a wire being pulled tighter in my chest. The pieces were too close, too precise. It didn't feel random, it felt designed. I was still standing there. Chen. Monica Chen. That name still haunted me, and then it clicked. Chen Holdings, Monica Jordan's push for Ethan's signature. The company they were trying to take it stripped control, while Ethan was still recovering. And if Monica was involved, Brianna Chen couldn't be far behind. My chest tightened as I returned to my room and shut the door. Was this connected to what happened to me? Was I just a bystander caught in the crossfire of something bigger, or had they chosen me for this? For being the girl? No one would suspect. The realization made my stomach turn. It wasn't just about heartbreak anymore. There were strings tied tightly between the people who had unraveled my life, and they were all converging here. That night, I couldn't keep it in. As I helped Ethan with his stretching exercises, I broke the silence. There's something I overheard today about your company. He didn't look at me. Go on. I told him everything verbatim, names, phrases, tone. I even mentioned Brianna Chen. At that he paused. You know her. My ex-fiancé left me for her. He blinked slowly. Caleb Hart. I nodded. You know him? No, but I've heard the name through Jordan. He rolled away from the wall and stared at me. Are you suggesting that my business partner and your ex are what, and on something together? I'm suggesting it's too much of a coincidence. He didn't say anything for a long moment, then. Finally, I'll review the documents. That was it. I tried not to feel crushed. I'd hoped for more, maybe belief, maybe action, but instead Ethan returned to silence. Like everything I said had gone straight into a void, the silence stung more than I expected. I had given him something raw, vulnerable, and I got nothing in return but the hollow echo of doubt. That night, I paced my room like a caged thing. Was I wrong? Was I imagining shadows, or worse? Was I right? And no one would believe me. The next morning, he knocked on my door. He never knocked when I opened it. Ethan sat in his wheelchair, a folder in his lap. You were right, he said. Chen Holdings isn't just investing the paperwork, transfers, decision-making rights, and ownership to a holding company. Jordan formed 2 months ago, hidden under layers. My breath caught. I want you to help me stop them. He handed me the folder. Are you sure? I asked after everything. Ethan nodded. If they think I'm too weak to fight, then they've forgotten who I was before I broke. The plan took days to finalize. Every night after the staff had gone, quiet, and the windows had gone dark, Ethan and I sat across from each other at the long oak table in the study, poring over documents and strategy notes. His hands trembled from exhaustion. Sometimes, but his voice stayed steady. He was building a war room piece by piece, and I was his only ally inside the walls. He'd already contacted his attorney. They were gathering records, emails, contracts, bank trails. Ethan had hidden nothing from me, not even his doubts. I trusted Jordan more than anyone. He said one night, he was there the day I pitched my first app. I let him speak on my behalf when I couldn't walk, and all this time you were right to trust your gut. I told him I was late to do it. He replied, but I won't be late again. 1 week later, a special meeting of the board was called. No one suspected anything, Ethan. Let Jordan think the signature was coming. He even thanked him in an email for handling things so well that same afternoon he suited up. It was the first time I saw him in a full tailored suit, midnight blue, crisp, handsome. In a way that made my heart slow. His body was still weak, but something about the way he moved, proud, upright, made the air in the room shift. He practiced walking to the conference table with a cane, just 10 steps. Then 15. Then 20. I want them to see it, he said with their own eyes. The day of the meeting, we arrived 15 minutes early. The building was all glass and chrome, and too much silence. Heads turned as we entered, Ethan walking beside me. Jaw set, steps measured, but firm. Shock rippled through the halls, like an electric current in the boardroom. Jordan sat at the head of the table. Monica was there too, in a dove-gray suit, legs crossed, lips painted like war, and beside her Caleb. He looked smaller than I remembered, still handsome, still smug, but less polished now, like something borrowed that hadn't been returned quite right. When Ethan stepped into the room, cane in hand, the silence snapped. "You're walking," Jordan said. "Not perfectly," Ethan replied, "but enough." He didn't sit at the far end. He walked directly to the head of the table, paused, and looked Jordan dead in the eyes. "This meeting is now under my authority," he said calmly, "and I'll begin with this." He placed a folder on the table and flipped it open. The room watched as he laid out every forged trail, every backdoor clause, every proof of Jordan's attempt to hand control of Locke's stratagem to a private shell company owned by Chen Holdings. Monica didn't flinch. Caleb shifted. Uncomfortably, Jordan's face slowly drained of color. "You can't prove intent," Jordan muttered. "I don't have to," Ethan replied. "I only have to prove breach of fiduciary duty, which I just did." The board stirred. The general counsel stood. "Mr. Locke, would you like to request an immediate vote of no confidence?" "I would," Ethan said, effective immediately. Chaos erupted. Monica rose first, her heels clicking like gunshots. "You don't know who you're messing with, Ethan." "Oh, I do," he said softly. "A woman who hides behind her father's name, and a man who sells out everything for a shortcut," she scoffed. "And your nurse. What, she's your co-founder now?" Ethan turned to look at me. "She's the reason I'm standing here at all." Caleb looked away. The board voted. It was unanimous. Jordan was removed, the contracts nullified, control reverted. When it was done and the room cleared out, Ethan and I stayed behind alone. He leaned on his cane, breathing hard, but his eyes shone. "You did it," I whispered. "No," he said, "we did," and then just for a second, he smiled wide and full and real, and I realized something I hadn't let myself believe until that moment. He wasn't the only one who'd taken his first steps that day. There, in that quiet room, heavy with the echoes of confrontation and victory, I saw the man he had been before the accident, the clarity, the will. But I also saw the man he had become, tempered by loss, rebuilt not just in muscle but in spirit. Weeks passed. The mansion no longer felt like a mausoleum. The windows were open, more often light poured into the halls, and even the garden, once dry and overgrown, breathed again. Ethan still had hard days, still limped, still had to brace against pain, but the bitterness that used to trail behind every step had started to lift. So had mine. The wedding I never had. I stopped mourning it, the name I almost took. I let it go slowly. I began seeing myself as more than just someone who'd been discarded. I started reading again, running short laps on the private trail behind the house, laughing without guilt. Ethan made it a point to cook 1 night a week, even though he burned rice and cursed at the stove like it owed him something. I let him. I sat at the kitchen island, legs curled up, smiling at his frustration. That was our ritual, small and spoken, but ours. One night, he handed me a dish I couldn't identify and said, "If this kills you, I want it on record." I tried. "You'll get the company in the will." I deadpanned. He paused. "Actually, no." I looked up. "I transferred it to a trust," he said, "one that includes you." I blinked. "What? I'm not giving you the company," he said gently, "but I want you to know I built something better with you than I ever did with anyone else, and I want you to be part of. What's next?" I stared at him. Ethan. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small black box. Before you say anything, he said quickly. You don't have to answer today or even this year. I know I'm still learning how to be a person again, and I know you didn't sign up for this. He opened the box. Inside was a ring, simple gold, one tiny sapphire in the middle. But I'd like to ask. Anyway, he said, voice low. Will you consider walking this road with me? Not because I need saving, but because with you I remember who I am. I didn't cry. I thought I might, but instead I felt something else. Something steady. A sense of arrival, like I'd walked through the darkest part of the forest and found not a castle, but a clearing, a quiet place to breathe. Again I took the ring, slid it onto my finger. I'm not saying yes, I whispered, smiling, but I'm not saying no. He laughed. That sounds exactly like you. We didn't rush. There were no grand announcements, no headlines, just more mornings, more progress. He walked, half a mile on his own. The following month, I passed my certification to open my own private practice. We hired more staff. I stayed in the house, but it no longer felt like his. It felt like ours. As for Caleb, he texted once, 2 lines, asking if I was okay. I never replied. I didn't need to, because the truth was I'd already gotten everything I was supposed to get from that heartbreak. A lesson, a detour, and a doorway into the life I hadn't even dared to imagine. And Ethan. He stopped using the chair altogether by the fall on his birthday. We took a short trip up to the coast. Just us. He walked beside me down the beach at sunset. Sand clinging to our feet, the wind cold enough to sting at one point. He looked out over the ocean and said, You think we'll ever go back to who we were before it all? I shook my head. I hope not. He turned to me and I added, Because who we became is better. He didn't respond. He just reached for my hand and didn't let go. So the story is over, our wonderful friends. Are you still here at this hour? If you're really here, it means something in this story touched your heart in some way. This wasn't just a love story. It was a story about resilience, about standing up after being knocked down in the most unexpected ways. It was about heartbreak, betrayal, and loss. But more importantly, it was about healing, about daring to believe in something again when life has tried to convince you otherwise. We saw how Rachel, abandoned at her lowest, found not only a second chance but a purpose through pain. And Ethan, shattered by his own fall, discovered strength not in solitude but in shared vulnerability. Together they didn't just rebuild, they redefined what it means to move forward. There's a quote by Haruki Murakami that says, When you come out of the storm, you won't be the same person who walked in. That's what the storm is all about. That's exactly what we witnessed. 2 people who stepped through their darkest nights and emerged not unscarred, but stronger, softer, and more real. This story reminds us that the chapters we dread the most might be the ones that shape us into who we were always meant to become. So if you're standing in your own storm right now, if something in your life feels broken beyond repair, hold on. You don't need to be who you were before. Who you're becoming is better. If this story moved you, if it stirred something in your heart, please like this video, share it with someone who might need it, and subscribe to the channel. Your presence here means the world to us. Until next time, take care of your heart and keep walking, even if it's just one quiet step at a time.